What's up, No Nation? It's the guys from Plant the Spear. I'm Jesse. That's Michael. We are coming to you live from 2025 ACC football kickoff here in Charlotte. And Florida State got its turn at the podium today. So we got to talk to Mike Norvell, Tommy Castellanos. Of course, there was Daryl Jackson Jr., Richie Leonard, and Earl Little that we got to talk to today. And, you know, we've heard a lot of comments from a lot of different teams. We'll share some thoughts on those as well. But we wanted to bring you guys a recap of what we heard from Florida State today. You know, Michael, anytime you have an event like this, there is a lot of coach speak,
that's right?
And that's the thing. We've heard a lot of these things. Everyone, it's talking season, right?
That's right.
It's talking season. So everyone's 0-0. Everybody has, you know, national championship aspirations.
That's right.
So please do hear us say that before we get into what we heard and some of our takeaways here. You still have to go back this up on the field.
Correct.
But, you know, this is our opportunity here for us at Plant the Spear anyway to get our chance to talk to the staff, to talk to Mike Norvell. And so it was interesting, some of the things that he said. First off, Michael, the first takeaway was Southern Baptist Mike came out.
Oh, but he did. He was ready to preach.
I don't think my man knew there was a microphone at the podium. And even if he did, he didn't need it because he brought the energy this morning. He was preaching to anyone and everyone who would listen.
From the very first question, I mean, even before the first question, Jesse, they gave the coaches like a time to kind of do like an opening speech. And like not even 30 seconds of open speech, he's already yelling at all of us to get ready for the season.
Yeah, and so it was interesting to hear. So let's talk first about, and we're going to kind of compile what we heard in the main conference room, which was available on ACC Network. But we were also able to speak with them in the breakout rooms where that is not televised. So we're going to kind of bring you some thoughts from there. So, Michael, I think we should first start with Mike Norvell, and we'll go with those takeaways. Then we'll get into what the players had to say. There was a lot to talk about from Mike Norvell. So, obviously, man, I think the first thing was a question that you asked, that you brought about, which was a great question. It was kind of what was missing from last year.
That's right.
And what have you done this year to make sure the things that went wrong last year don't happen again? And, you know, one of the things that he says is like, look, man, everybody wants to be at the top.
That's right.
But are you willing to put in the work to get there? And he's got a group of guys that he says, look, man, they're hungry, they're pissed off, they want to go to work, and they want to prove that last season didn't really have anything to do with them, right? They want to make it right. He said they know what it feels like to lift trophies.
That's right.
And he just wants guys that'll work. He had a quote that I loved. He said, look, man, I don't want a team full of sidekicks.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it. Let's go do it.
That's right.
So that is truthfully something that Mike Norvell has always said.
He's always said that.
He has always said that. But it's something he's really harped on this offseason about, you know, just talking back to last year, is I don't want guys that are about the show. I want guys that are going to go put in the work and put in the sweat and make things happen. So it is encouraging to hear that. I think the main takeaway from Mike Norvell, and we'll get into some more points later, is that they understand what last year was.
That's right.
Right? But he also, there was a couple questions when it referred back to last season. It's like, look, I'm ready to talk about this year.
Yep.
This is a new team with a lot of new staff members, a lot of new players. Yep. And it seems like the focus is, okay, enough about 24.
Yeah.
We can't, that's water under the bridge. We can't change that. Let's move on to 2025. We've got a group that's hungry and ready to go set the record straight.
Absolutely. And you know, the reason for that question was, as much as Mike Norvell wants to get over 2024, as much as those players want to get over 24, it happened. 2-10 happened. The worst collapse in college football history, the worst collapse in Florida State history actually happened. And so we, the media, we're going to ask about that. And so what I was trying to get to was really like, what were the things that you felt like was missing? Because one of the things that we recognized very clearly was prior to that season, Mike Norvell had a way of recruiting players and getting the right kind of mentality to come in.
Fit and family is what they always talked about. Yep.
And last year they got away from that. And it was clearly evident on the field. And, you know, Mike talked about how he didn't want sidekicks this year. You know, he said that, you know, he gave me the death stare. You know, I got the death stare. And he said, you know, we don't want sidekicks. We want people to go out and do it. Which, if you want to cut through the coach speak, Jesse, kind of gave us a clue as to what some may have transpired in last season, where you probably had players who just thought they were the helmet, you know, the spear on the helmet and the logo on the chest, thought they were just going to win every game. And then when it got tough and they got their butts kicked, they didn't know how to respond, which has been a Mike Norvell, you know, staple since the entire time he was here. So I felt like that question actually gave us a little bit of insight into last year, and is showing us that actually they were returning to that mentality this year.
Yeah, and he talked a lot about how there was a lot of disconnects last year. There were questions about leadership last year, and you bring up a good point. In 2023, Mike Norvell, he said, the thing with that team, no matter the adversity, whether it was Jordan Travis getting hurt, whether it was being down late in the game or rolling with your third string quarterback or whatever, they responded to adversity. That's right. And a lot of times last year, what we saw was the team folded under pressure.
That's right.
Because you did lack a lot of leadership on that team. Right. And that's something that he talked about. He said that the leadership has gotten a lot better this year. You have guys who are taking that role and accepting the challenge that they're putting towards him. And he said that, look, we push these guys. We have challenged these guys to step up and be leaders. And, one of the things he says is, I want them to be pissed off.
That's right.
To go be their best every single day. Right. It's not about last year. It's about this season. It says that this group is hungry. And so, man, I definitely think where he also talked about, look, I like the guys we have in the current era of college football. You have to make a choice to stay and be part of this because guys can leave at any time they want. So the guys that you have here are the guys that some of them may have already been here beforehand, right? They just kind of stayed the course. But some of the new guys that came in to help flip this thing around, they knew what they were walking into.
Right.
They knew this was going to be a little bit of a rebuilding season to try and get things back on the track. And that's something that I talked about previously with, with Jermaine Johnson.
That's right.
The guy came in to a team who probably wasn't going to win a trophy.
That's right.
But you could help them get back. And so that's the kind of players I think that he's looking for this year, that they're not trying to talk about it. They're not trying to roll the helmet out there, like you said, and let that win games. It's about the work. It's about the effort. It's about the leadership and the team aspects and coming together and saying, hey, look, last year happened, but that wasn't us, and that's not acceptable anymore. We have to go about fixing this, and that's through the work.
That's right. Well, I think a big emphasis out of that, what we saw was this idea of culture. They wanted to get back. Mike Norvell wanted to get the culture back to what got them to 13-0 and 22-4 over those last 2 years. One of the things that he told the local media in a private session was that they had to force team building activities last year to try to get the team to bond, and that he just and one of the most kind of poignant quotes about that, he said there were reasons, and then he just kind of left it at that, Jesse. But there were reasons why they had to force that kind of team bonding, that mentality, because they weren't finding it. There weren't leaders showing up, and so this year it has been very clear. He even said it. He goes, "We've not had to do that this year," and so players are naturally bonding. They're coming in. I love that he used this word desperation.
Yeah.
He said they're desperate. And I even asked him in the kind of the breakout session, I said, is that desperation based on the fact that you feel like you have to win? Or is that a desperation because you just want to get out there and just win? And he said, we just want to win. Yeah. That's the standard. And yes, we let the standard down last year, but the standard has always been the standard. We're desperate to accomplish the standard. And for a coach speak, I'm not going to lie, that kind of fired me up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He opened with, we know that last year was not up to the standard at Florida State.
Right.
We understand that that's competing for championships, and we understand how that foundation has been laid, and that we didn't live up to that last year. But he also reiterated that, again, like I said, we've hoisted trophies. We won an ACC championship in 2023. We know what that standard is. We know how to get there. There was just so much that went wrong last year. And we've talked about that ad nauseum, so it's not anything to really dig into now. I think the main talking point for Mike Norvell really was that, man, I've thought about last year. People, how did you self-reflect on last year? I've done all that stuff. I've learned from it. I've taken lessons from it. Let's bury that and move on. Because reflecting on that, of course, it's worth doing.
Right.
It's not going to help you get better in 2025. So let's move on to this year. It's a new team. And that was something that I asked him about in the breakout session. I said, Mike, when we've seen teams like Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State flipping that team from a 3-win team to a CFP team, Indiana the same way. Even Florida State went from 5 to 10 wins in 2022. There's so many people, and this is something we've talked about on our show before as well, where there's so many people that put 2025 Florida State into a box of what they can be based on the 2024 season. And my question to Mike was, with so much turnover, 70% of your staff is new. I think something like 14 to 16 maybe starters are going to be brand new on this team. Shouldn't every season be looked at in its own little bubble? And of course, you're going to have things that carry over. You're talking recruiting and things like that. But it's not something where you just, you come into this season with so much change, you're dragging that ball and chain from 2024. It's a whole new season. And he agreed. He said, look, man, every team is its own. Every team has its own life, has its own leaders, its different players. And there's so much change this year that let's see what this season holds, not based off last season. Because, again, man, no one would have ever seen 2024 coming based on 2023. So you don't know what 2025 can be based on 2024.
No, I absolutely agree. And I thought that was such a great question by you because oftentimes, especially as fans, we're a fan site, so we feel it too. As fans, we build on the collective. Whatever last season was, we're going to build on to that. Whatever 2 seasons were, we're going to build on to that 2 seasons later. And so it's easy for us to get really just kind of harped in. Man, we just went 2-10, 2-10, 2-10. But those coaches, they have a singular season mindset. Those players have a singular season mindset. Now, we have to admit, though, Jesse, it doesn't erase 2-10.
No, it doesn't.
They can say all they want that it's a singular season, and we're gonna live in that way. But if they don't start out hot, if they don't win games this year, 2-10 is going to be worse than it ever was before.
Right, and I think the important part to remember with that is if you come out and you do well in 2025, then maybe you can look back to 2024 and say, look, there was just a lot of things that went into that.
That's right.
But if you don't do well in 2025, if all this talk is just talk and you don't back it up on the field, then I think you can start going, okay, well, maybe 2024 was the real Mike Norvell.
Correct.
Maybe 2021 and all that type of stuff was who we really have. And so, again, all of this sounds great in sound bites, but you got to go back it up. If you want to prove that 2024 wasn't who you are as a team and a program, the only way to do that is to go out and win games in 2025. And so turning our focus to 2025 as well, we asked him, and he was asked by some other people as well, about the new coordinator hires.
That's right.
Kind of, one, what do you think about the coordinators? Of course, we know he gushes over Gus Malzahn. I asked him about, Gus bringing that experience as a guy who was a coordinator on a national championship team, a coach who took a team to a national championship and lost to Florida State. Love you, Gus, mean it. But I asked him about that, and I said, what does that experience do for you on and off the field? And was that something you looked for? And he said, yes, that was something that we wanted because that type of voice in the room, he knows what it's supposed to look like, right? He's had a lot of experience. The last time he was a play caller, he put a ring on his finger at Auburn. And so that type of experience is very valuable. And I think that was something that Mike Norvell really went after when they made the coaching hires, because they knew they had to win right now. They couldn't necessarily take chances on an up-and-comer. So I think we'll see how it works out, and I'm hopeful that it does work out. But that was something that he talked about too, because having that caliber of coordinators with Gus and Tony, he also spoke about how that allows him to be more in touch with all aspects of his program. He said that allows me to be more personal with the players, to be able to notice where maybe if something's going wrong with the offense, he doesn't have to put all of his focus into that. He can look at the defense. He can look at the special teams. Anything that's not working, he can have his hands on it. And so I think that in itself, let's be honest, in the modern era of college football where you have to manage rosters and payments and all these things, I think that's a better fit for the system. And now you can have a guy who can be watching the program, because we've always heard that Mike Norvell is very detail-oriented. He's very attention-to-detail type of guy. So now that he can have his focus on the entire program, I think that's going to be better, and that's only made possible by having coordinators you can trust.
That's right.
And I don't know that we had that in the past.
No, I'd absolutely agree. And this is not a shot, again, at Alex Atkins or Adam Fuller, but yeah, I felt like Mike Norvell felt like he had to be more hands-on, especially on the offense, since he was the offensive play caller. And one of the things in the question that you really asked well in the main media session was about that relationship with Gus Malzahn. And, he touted the 20-year relationship that him and Gus have had together, where he has explicit trust in what Gus is going to do. Now, that isn't to say that Mike Norvell, who's, as you mentioned, super detailed, you're going to see sprinkles of Mike Norvell in this offense, but it is going to be a 98% Gus Malzahn led, Gus Malzahn called offense. And that has allowed Mike Norvell to actually have more of, I know they hate this term, but the CEO approach to college football. Because in this day and age, you're not just running a football team anymore. You're running a multi-million-dollar business as a head coach. And that's going to give him more opportunities to be with, raising money, be with players, be more personal in that. And I think those were, Jess, I think we can all admit that those were aspects that maybe 2-10 doesn't happen if he has a little bit more eyes on certain things. And so now in 2025, with somebody like Tony White, who's had success running a top 20 defense, and Gus Malzahn, who, offense is going to score. And I know we're going to talk about the players' coaches, but one of the things I really love is that, the players, offensive side talked about how if the offense is gelling right, they're going to put up points.
Yeah.
And that frees Mike Norvell to not as much be so focused in on what's happening.
Yeah, and I do think he's going to have his hands in the offense, helping game plan a little bit. Now, Michael, it might be like telling your dad, hey, we got to tighten up here. So I don't know, because, Gus is that's the top of his coaching
tree. He's an old school football coach.
Yeah, so you hope you can tell your dad to tighten up a little bit there. But, man, I think really one of the last big takeaways I got, and I'll let you share anything that you have left, is that this team in 2025 has so much better leadership and better cohesion as a team. And, Michael, for those of us that played football, if you're not out there fighting for the guy next to you, and you're very kind of self-oriented, and we saw that a lot with that team last year, it's just not going to work. You can't have a bunch of individual mercenaries kind of running around trying to work together as a team. So I think that's something that when we get into talking about like Tommy Castellanos, he's been a guy that stepped into that role.
That's right.
And so I think he's really done a good job with that. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways I think this year is that you're seeing more cohesion and more leadership from the players, and you're also seeing a stronger staff that's pushing those players.
That's right.
Because we heard Earl Little. We heard Daryl Jackson say they are pushing me to step up and be that vocal leader, and I'm trying to take on that role. So this staff is trying to put a lot of the ownership on the players.
That's right.
Whereas last year we heard it was the staff who had to force things. They had to force the energy.
That's right.
And that message had fallen on deaf ears with the team. And so I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes this year. But still, my question is, when times get tough and the adversity hits, does that leadership stay consistent? Does that will to want to stay consistent when you're up against adversity?
Absolutely. One of my biggest takeaways, Jesse, before we move into the player stuff is, I asked Mike Norvell about that idea of desperation, because you heard it a lot. You heard it with the coach. You heard it with the players. They just kept saying, we are desperate. We are desperate. And one of the questions I asked him is, was there a sense of that refuse to lose? Like, we're going to do everything we possibly can. We're going to go out guns blazing. We're going to shoot our shot. We're going to try to win this game. Did that feel like that was missing last year? And what gives you confidence that you see that this year? And he talked about, that desperation was, again, it was kind of a coach-forced desperation. Yeah. And this year it has been a player-led desperation where the coaches have then chimed in. And I actually like that. I like hearing that. I like hearing that the players are super desperate to get Florida State back to a dominant program, back to the nation's elite. Now, we don't have expectations that they're winning a national title this year, but just hearing them say that, man, we need to put the fear. Mike Norvell talked about this in the breakout session. We need to put the fear back in people that when Florida State comes, people are scared. And I heard players say that same thing, and I was like, yes. Absolutely, that's what we need. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, and that's going to make, the attitude is going to make a big difference. And that's something that we just really didn't see from this team. And as we get into the player coach, you're going to hear some things about Tony White as well that I really like, where you're playing physical. You're asking guys to play with tenacity, and that's important too. So, Michael, let's move on to Thomas Castellanos. Tommy Castellanos. We got to talk to him on the main stage. We both got to speak with him in the breakout session there. And the first thing I want to say is Tommy does get a little bit of the vibe, from the things that he said, where everyone thought maybe he was coming into this as a guy who maybe his head don't fit in the door.
That's right.
He's an arrogant guy. And I didn't get that impression at all. He seemed very humble but very confident. And there's a difference between confidence and cockiness. And he just talked about how he just wants to be the best teammate possible.
That's right.
I think that was one of the big takeaways. Now, he did say, I stand on what we said.
He said, we stand on business.
We standing on business. But he also said he didn't mean that as disrespect.
Correct.
Right? And we heard that in the clip where he's like, look, man, I wasn't trying to disrespect what Alabama is as a program. I'm just trying to instill confidence in my guys. And so he is a kind of a more humble guy when you talk to him in person, I think. But also he knows how much of the weight of the season is on his shoulders.
Absolutely.
And how important it is for him to be that motivator, be that leader. The first thing he said in his opening press conference at Florida State was, one of the biggest things I noticed missing from this locker room was the leadership
That's right.
aspect and
That's
how
right.
I'm going to try to be that guy and how they've embraced him with that. So I really love what Tommy Castellanos had to say from that aspect.
I do too, because he talked about there were some other interviews that he had done prior to today where he talked about he had talked to some of the old heads, as they call them, the former players, and they were talking to him about how that Florida State was feared and that people would be scared when they'd see that helmet with the spear coming through the tunnel. And so he said, I was trying to instill that confidence into my guys. That's why I said what I said about Alabama. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I was just trying to instill that confidence. And I love that.
I want a confident quarterback.
I want my trigger man to be who believe that when we walk on the field, we walking off with W's, right? I mean, he was even asked about in the main session about that Jameis Winston mentality. He said, I have characteristics like Jameis Winston. I'm goofy. I like to have fun, like to cut up, but also like I have a cerebralness about myself. Like I want to win, and I want to win desperately and badly. And I just really appreciated it about him today. That was one of the big things that stood out to me.
Yeah, and he's a confident guy, but so was Jameis.
That's
I
right.
mean, Jameis is, we some dogs, we ain't no puppies,
That's right.
and we ain't leaving without a victory.
That's
so
right.
You want that.
That's right.
You don't. One of the biggest complaints we had last year, and granted, we're not in the locker room, so we don't see every aspect of it. DJ, you just seemed like a fly on the wall.
Yeah,
he just kind of seemed like he was going through the motions.
He was just happy to be there.
Right, and I had heard some things, through the grapevine, whatever you want to say, where, he had his family here, and I think he had just got married and stuff like that, where he had a lot of outside things that
There's a lot of things happening in his life.
Right. And so it seems like Tommy's sole focus is I'm pouring everything I have into this team. And he said, we're just going to take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
We're going to try and win every day. But we got to have a championship mindset.
That's right.
And I love that because you can't come into the season going, oh, well, a team that I wasn't even on, matter of fact, I beat last year, went 2-10. That's got nothing to do with him. You got to come into each season as its own and have that championship mindset. So I love it.
Yeah.
Now, I asked him a little bit about the offense and the system and how things were going to change. Obviously, we look back to 2023. You have a quarterback there at Boston College, ran for 1,100 yards, was kind of really known for his run threat ability more than his arm. You fast forward to 2024, different offensive system, really progressed as a passer. The rushing dropped off a cliff. And so I asked him, I said, are they going to blend the concepts for you to be able to maximize your skill set? Because, you have a unique skill set. Let's be honest. Not many quarterbacks run for 1,100 yards or have that ability. And he did talk about that. And he said, look, man, I just want to do whatever they ask me to do to help this team win. If that means running the ball, if that means throwing the ball, I'll do whatever I got to do to help win. So I think that is great to hear, because you don't want him to overly rely on one aspect or the other. You want him to use those legs, but you want him to just you got to throw the ball, man. And that's the quarterback position. So it was good to hear him talk about that. And it does sound like with Gus, knowing what he has at quarterback, you're going to see them utilize both aspects of his game.
That's right. Yeah, he even talked about that. I asked him a question about, a lot of teams will focus on his legs and trying to keep him in the pocket and keep him corral. What is him and Gus, what are they looking at to try to make sure that teams have to respect his throwing? And he said, absolutely. A lot of times when teams are game planning against me, they want to act like that's all I can do.
Yeah.
And so we are looking at active ways to make sure that I get an opportunity to show my arm, to showcase my passing skills. I mean, the man did throw for 17 touchdowns last season before he got benched, and so he has the capability. And we know Gus Malzahn is going to want to take shots. You don't go out and pay the kind of money that we're assuming Florida State paid for a Deuce Robinson and a Squirrel Wright if you're just going to be running around all day. Now, yes, his legs. And he even said this, his legs are going to give him an opportunity to open up that passing game even more. And so I thought that was really just kind of a cool way to think about, how is it that they're going to game plan. And one of the things he said, we got to look at how do we attack them instead of them attacking us in this way.
I love that, man, because you got to have the attacking mindset. And he did say this system is going to allow him to be his best self, the best version of himself. Because, again, I want to see him run the ball, but you got to have the passing aspect too. And, you talked about them bringing in some other guys around him. And I asked him, I said, no disrespect to Boston College. Obviously, you beat us last year. But, you had pointed this out before where they're just not on par with the talent with a lot of teams. And I asked him, I said, hey, what does it feel like? How excited are you to be able to play on a team that actually has some weapons around you. And we've
right.
talked about this on past episodes. Deuce is a good receiver. Squirrel is a good receiver. You got a lot of weapons on this team that could potentially make you a good team, right? And he talked about that is going to help him be so much better as a player, where he doesn't feel like he has to carry the weight of the offense on his back, and that he can play his game, but also rely on those other guys to make plays too.
Absolutely.
And so, I think that was really big. Just to know that he has other guys that can make things happen besides him. Not that Boston College didn't have some players too, but he's never had this level of talent around him.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there was a confidence, but there was also a recognition that he's not walking into a juggernaut from last season.
Right.
He's walking into a team that is desperate for getting back to national relevance, getting back to the elite, but also he understands. I think it's very clear. He understands. He's working with a on the deeper end of the pool, as they would say, when it comes to talent here. And you can see the excitement I think he has for what he believes that this season can be.
Yeah, and it's funny, I asked him and make sure you check out our YouTube channel. As soon as we get maybe better internet service, maybe by the time you're watching this, it's not that great here. We'll get a lot of clips and interviews and stuff that we have uploaded to the channel there. But I asked him, Michael, I thought it was interesting. I said, okay, well, tell me about the talent around you. And then I followed up, but I said, give me a sleeper pick. Who's somebody that Florida State has on their roster that you've seen on the offense that maybe people aren't talking about? And I had a name in mind that I was looking for. We've heard Jeremiah Wilson mention this name, and the first name he popped off with was the exact name I was looking for, and that was Javon Boggs.
Yeah.
So this is the kid. He said, look, he come in as a freshman. He's put in the work. He's put on display his skill set, and he's going to earn some playing time. He's going to surprise some people. And so I'm really excited about Javon Boggs this season. And also one of the things he talked about was Squirrel White, one of the proven guys. And we talked about on our last episode where we've heard deuce all offseason.
That's right.
Not really much on the Squirrel White home front, but he said that, look, man, he has been a full go this offseason. He looks great, and he talked about his speed and his playmaking ability. So I love hearing that because he was injured at Tennessee, so we were kind of questioning that as well. So that's good to hear. But yeah, man, I just think he's excited about the weapons around him. And then the other thing I wanted to say was I asked him, because we talk about Tony White's defense. We talk about this 3-3-5. We talk about everything that goes into it. And I said, well, Tommy, there's nobody that understands the defense better than the guy who has to go against it every day in practice. And what had me excited was he said, look, this is probably the only 3-3-5 I'm going to go against. And he also said, this is the toughest defense I've ever had to go against because it's so multiple. It's so versatile in what they can do. You just never really know what's coming at you. And so that makes me excited about the defense, right? To know that the guy that goes against it every day thinks it's a real pain in the rear to go against. And we've heard that. Urban Meyer quoted that.
That's right.
A lot of guys have quoted that. That makes me excited for the defense coming from the quarterback.
Yeah, when the like you said, when the guy who's facing that defense every day is saying, man, it's kind of complicated to understand. It's kind of, your checks and everything, you have to be on par because you're not sure where the blitz is coming from, where they're coming at, what they're trying to do. They mix coverages, they're disguising coverages. It's really hard. In a lot of ways, that gives you confidence. Like, okay, this can be a good defense that will actually, help Florida State win games. On maybe some little small of it, you're like, hopefully we don't have to face any 3-3-5 defense.
Exactly.
But we will, because when they play NC State, that's going to be.
Well, they get away with the 3-3-5. They got a new coordinator.
That's right. So hopefully we don't have to face that this year, because if it's that complicated and that hard, it gives me a little bit of worry.
Right. And but what excites me about that is if you're talking about one that's hard for a quarterback who's played in a lot of games. Game one, we got a quarterback who's making his first start.
That's right.
So maybe if you can confuse a younger quarterback, that could give you an advantage there. Now, a couple of fun things on Tommy before we move on here. I did ask him, I said, Tommy, did you ever in a million years expect to be at your dream school where you wanted to play coming out of high school, but they wouldn't recruit him as a quarterback with the guy who you committed to out of high school as the offensive coordinator? And he said, I would have never thought this would have been the situation, but this is the path that God led him down, and he's very grateful for the situation. And then I thought one of the funnest quotes of the day from him was somebody asked him about the Florida rivalry.
Yeah.
And he said he walked into the facility on day one drinking a Gatorade, And, OG Odell.
Odell ain't messing around.
Odell handled that. And so he's been a Powerade guy ever since.
I love that.
So I love that. So he's embracing the traditions there. But now let's talk about what we heard from some of the other guys here. Now, I didn't get to talk to Richie Leonard. I know you did, so I'll give you some options, some time to talk about him there. We did get to talk to Daryl Jackson as well as Earl Little. And really, they're maybe not a ton of quotes out there.
Right.
They're kind of very soft-spoken, short-spoken guys. Yeah. But the biggest takeaway that you heard from both of those guys was how this, and this plays off of what Tommy said as well, how that 3-3-5 just allows you to be so versatile.
Yeah.
How you can be so multiple, how you can be up at the safety position and come down and blitz and get in different coverages. And Daryl Jackson talked about how it just allows you to kind of play free and just to go make plays, man, and do things. And so, Michael, I think I'm getting really, it's talking season.
It's talking
season. I might
be
drinking a little bit of the Kool-Aid. I'm getting excited about this defense.
Yeah. Daryl Jackson said something to the effect of I can play in any defense, but this defense does allow me to be more aggressive, a little bit more freer. He sounded really excited about it. I mean, the moment you brought up when we brought up the question, I mean his pearly whites just open real wide.
Yeah, bro's got the whitest teeth I've ever seen.
The whitest teeth I've ever seen, and which is awesome. But he was really excited for this defense. It sounds like the players too, even in talking to Earl Little, they were just talking about how this defense is going to allow them to kind of, be faster and quicker and not thinking too much, which we heard a lot about. Not to throw more dirt on Adam Fuller's grave, but we heard a lot about that, having to overthink and not being confident in where to be. Well, a lot of the players are just saying, we know where we need to be. It gives us more aggressiveness and allows us to be there. So I am too getting excited about this defense.
Because we heard a lot under Adam Fuller about when things were not going well, it was we have to simplify, and it's man, how complicated is this defense?
Exactly.
Go hit somebody. It doesn't get more simple than that.
Exactly.
But I like that this defense does allow them to really take advantage of the athletes that they have.
Right.
And that makes me really excited there. And I think more than just the defense, the schematic talk, we can talk about that all day. I think it's what Tony White, which has kind of been his signature, gets out of his team, gets out of his players. They both talked about how he preaches playing hard, being physical, and having that edge.
Yeah.
And we saw that, with Adam Fuller in 2023. We saw that. But then it kind of went away in 2024. And Tony White's defenses, he's never really been supported by a good offense, but they always, one thing they always come back to with his defenses is they play hard, they tackle well, they fly around. And so, I just really think, look, the defense wasn't terrible last year. But half the problem was effort issues.
Exactly.
They just didn't play hard. Exactly. And so I think if Tony White, maybe no pun intended for his Syracuse time at Syracuse, but man, if you can squeeze every little bit of juice out of this defense, and you have a scheme that's kind of tough to go against, you can see where this defense could be a top 20 type defense with the talent that they have, because they still have some pieces on that side of the ball.
Well, I think you bring up an excellent point, and the fact that this was a team that the defensive scheme, while yes, it was confusing and they kept simplifying, they weren't absolutely terrible.
No,
they were in the right places. How often did we watch film last year where they were in the right place, but they would just get pushed or get blown out, or they wouldn't attack the hole with aggressiveness, and so they'd get run over, or they try to tackle with one pinky. It looked like
it was like a bread store out there with all them loaves on the field.
Exactly. We were just leaving bread everywhere. But this year, you can hear a clear sense of, again, going back to that word, desperation. I mean, the different Earl Little Jr. and Daryl Jackson talked about this idea of we got to be more aggressive, man. We have to go after it. We have to get it. And I just really appreciated that. Now, obviously, it's talking season. We'll see what happens actually on the field. And they're going to get a test of tests on that first opportunity when that 260 running backs running right at you from Alabama. Are you going to be aggressive enough to not loaf? That's going to matter. But it sounds like that was a huge emphasis this offseason.
Yeah, 100% agree. And one of the things that Earl Little brought up as well, and we heard from Daryl that they're trying to push him into that leadership position. Right. And Earl said the same thing. But one thing that I love that Earl said, and I really think this is something that you're kind of seeing, Michael, last year it kind of felt like a lot of the guys we had were maybe there for a paycheck. We saw guys hold out over NIL and things or threaten to hold out over NIL and things like that. I mean, he talked about just playing for the logo.
That's
playing for state, as he called it, coming from Florida. And he talked about how much that meant, how much it meant to represent this program. And so I think maybe this team this year has a little better grasp, because even though Tommy didn't start here, this was his dream school.
That's right.
And so I really do feel like the team cares more about the name on the front of their jersey now than maybe the back of their jersey a little bit. Now, again, we still have to see it, like I said, but I think it's good to hear them talk about, we care about the logo. We care about Florida State. And they asked about recruiting too.
That's right.
And he almost pulled a Jalen Ramsey.
He almost did.
But he's like, man, come play for Florida State. Come represent this logo.
Yeah.
And they understand. But what they understand with that, they know the standard.
That's right.
They know what Florida State's supposed to be, and they're going to work hard to get back to that.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Orlando Jr. basically said, if you're in the state of Florida, you play football, you should come play for the state football team.
Yeah.
And I just love that. It's just a confidence back into the logo. I mean, he referenced the logo several times where he said, how could you not want to play for this logo? When I saw that logo, it just makes me want to, do well and be a great defender. I really appreciate it about that as well. And I have a sense that these players recognize, what's at stake here.
Yeah.
Let's remove all the coaching stuff. What's at stake is, for some of these players, for Dale Jackson, for Tommy, this is it.
This is your money year.
This is your money year.
Yep.
So you've got to execute and make it happen.
Yeah, and they know that through what we've heard some quotes, they know that coaches' jobs and livelihoods are on the line too.
That's right.
And so, like I said, I didn't get to talk to Richie Leonard. The only takeaway I had is that's a big man.
He a big one.
That's a big man. So you did get to speak with him a little bit. So I'll let you share some things there, as this offensive line needs to have a rebound year.
Exactly.
So tell me what you heard from Richie Leonard.
Yeah, talking to Richie Leonard, number one, I think the most important thing that we all want to know as fans, I'm sure you, Plant Spirit Nation, want to know, is his injury. He says he's fully healed. He's ready to go. He feels great. There's nothing lingering or holding him back, which I thought was great just to hear that. Sometimes you can always have maybe still a little lingering stuff there, but he felt really good.
And you know what they say, the best ability is
availability. That's right. And I love the fact that he was trying to be funny, but also serious, because he got a question around, what's the difference between Alex Atkins and Herb Hand?
Yeah.
And he said, you can, offensive line it's just basically skinning a cat in the same way. Something like that. That's kind of the phrasing he used. But he's basically saying, it's not really that much different, And then he said, and I don't know if anybody else caught this, but me, I'm very analytical. I hear everything. Then he just kept talking, and he goes, but Herb Hand is an excellent teacher.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
I love that. And the thing is, when you look back to Alex Atkins, and I don't know anything about him as a coach. I just judge him by the product on the field, which was not very good. He had even said where he kind of preferred to take in transfers because they were already developed versus high school guys. So now I think you have a guy who's much stronger on the developmental side. We've seen him put guys into the league, which is not really something we've seen from Alex Atkins. So that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and I thought that was a soundbite of soundbites. And what does that tell you, right? That, again, if Alex Atkins preferred transfers, that he could only maybe have to tweak things. Now you have Herb Hand who's come in, and he's actually teaching and helping these guys understand what is it like to run this game? What is it like to get leverage and do the things that you need to do to be a successful offensive line? Man, that's going to encourage them more. That's going to give them even more confidence to go into that season. Of course, I asked him about bringing in all the other guys, and he said that, they're excited for the line. They feel like that they can be a really good line. He trusts the coaching that Herb Hand is giving the players. And so I thought, Richie Leonard, he seems excited, seems ready to go, body feels good. And I think he believes that they can be something decent this year.
That's good. And Mike Norvell talked about Luke Pettibon a little bit and how he's just really, really been raved about in spring. The guy is just really a consistent performer for this offensive line, and that's great to hear because, again, the success starts and stops with that offensive line because last year was just so bad.
Yeah.
And so you would think that would be much better. So, Michael, let's kind of wrap this up with our final thoughts here on what we've heard from Florida State on ACC Media Days. Look, man, again, like we talked about, I know it sounds like we're preaching the good word right now with Florida State, and maybe that's what talking season does to you. You're here, you're around all of this and everything, and it gets you excited for football season. We're only about a month away from kickoff. But, man, again, it comes back to the rubber's got to meet the road.
That's right.
All this talk is great, and I love what they have to say. I think they have the right mentality. I think they're approaching this season as last year was what it was. Let's bury it. Let's burn the tape.
That's
Let's
right.
move on from that. We're a different team with different pieces, and we're ready to prove that
That's
on
right.
the field. But, man, again, it comes back to you got to do it because it's
it.
all
Yep.
talk. You go out there and lose by 30 points to Alabama, all this means nothing,
It's
right?
done.
And so you got to go back it up. So please hear us when we say we understand this is talking season, right? But we heard a lot of the good things before, right?
That's
we
right.
heard
That's right.
biggest, strongest, fastest offensive
That's
line
right.
last year. Wide receiver was a strength.
That's right.
Which was not true.
Not true.
And so, again, you have to go back that up on the field. But, sometimes in the messaging, if you
That's right.
kind of can read between the lines, you can tell that the team seems more cohesive. There's better leadership. There's more of a desire to go win for the good of the team and not just be here because you got a paycheck.
That's right.
And I think that's really important. And, Michael, sometimes when you see a team overachieve, a lot of the times it's due to that cohesiveness,
That's
that
right.
leadership, that everybody, it's just a well-oiled machine.
Yep.
And so I think you're going to see a much better Florida State team in 2025. I really am confident in that. What that ceiling is, we don't know, right? There's still a lot of question marks around this team. There's still a lot of things that need to be answered that you're not going to get answered in a press conference sitting at a table.
That's true.
That's only going to happen when you touch the grass for the first time this season. But, man, I'm encouraged, right? I'm encouraged about where this program can go in 2025 in getting itself back to respectability at a minimum. But, again, man, you got the proof is in the pudding, and it's about time to put it in the I guess you put pudding in the refrigerator,
Yeah, I think
maybe?
so. I think that's what you do. I don't eat pudding.
However you make pudding, that's what they got to do, right?
That's right. That's right. Mike Norvell said, Jesse, practice starts next Wednesday. That's when they start next Wednesday, right? So right now, they're doing all the interviews. They're going around all the press. They've been on the ACC network most of the day today, right? They're doing all the talking because it's talking season.
Yep.
They're trying to get the hype. They're trying to get the fan base back into it. They're trying to even talk themselves into believing that this is going to be a successful season.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that one of my biggest takeaways, if you cut through the coach speak, what you hear very clearly is that there was a lack of toughness mentality from this team that has always been evident in a Mike Norvell Florida State team, right? It's very clear. He harped on that word a lot and this idea of desperation.
Yeah.
So the biggest takeaway I'm getting from this is not the whole hype and Southern Baptist Mike, though, when he stares at you, Jesse.
Oh, he gives you the death stare.
It's the death stare. It's
intimidating.
We've watched it online on other interviews before, but to actually get it in person, whew.
I accidentally interrupted him in 2022, my very first time here, because I was nervous. I was a young pup at the time.
Yeah.
Boy, let me tell you what, I don't know what was on the wall behind me, but he was staring at it because he went right through me.
Oh, man. I mean, I asked a question, and he got Southern Baptist Mike on me, and he stared at me the whole time. I just told myself, don't look away. Don't look away.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I'll take away from is that Mike Norvell is trying to reinstill a desperation into this team, and they need it.
Yeah.
Again, we're fan site, so we're going to call it like it is.
Right.
They need it.
Yeah.
This is a money year for a lot of the players and for Mike Norvell.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that they recognized that Mike recognized what happened last year. He talked to it, he addressed it, and then he said, we've got to get going. We've got to get the standard back. And I think I'm confident that they believe they can do that this year.
Yeah, and one of the things that, he keeps talking about is, I know what it's supposed to look like. We've done the trophies and all this type of stuff, and I think people do forget about that. As bad as last season was,
right.
And there is no excuse you can make for how bad last year was. This is still a head coach who took this program from where it was.
That's right.
Of course, they had a bad year in 2020. There was a lot of things that went into that.
Right.
But then they won 10 games, and they won 13 games. They won an ACC championship. There's a lot of teams that haven't won an ACC championship in about 21 years of trying.
That's right.
And so they've been able to do that in a short amount of time. And so I do think people have to keep in mind, like, you have a guy that knows what it takes to get there. You have a guy in Gus Malzahn who knows what it takes to win a national championship. Tony White maybe hasn't had that taste of success, but it's not for the lack that he didn't hold up his part of the deal.
Right.
He just has never been supported by really a great offense.
That's right.
And so I do think that I'm still curious to see who the real Mike Norvell is, right? Is he the guy who's had, let's call it like it is, 3 losing seasons in 5 years? Or is he the guy that took the program from kind of shambles where it was at, has had a lot of bad luck happen to him, and still was able to put together a 23-4 record in those 2 years. But 2-10, it was, there's just no excuse for that, right? But I think he knows that, and I think he's owned up to that. And so they have to fix things But again, Michael, talking isn't going to fix it.
Nope.
It still matters wins and losses on the field. But man, you just want to root for him because you know he's passionate about what he's doing.
Absolutely.
And he knows the standard at Florida State. He knows what it means to this fan base and this program to get back to its winning ways.
Right.
And I really do think, we talked about this off air where you heard Mike Norvell just spent countless hours at the facilities trying to figure this thing out last year. And so I do think he really does care.
That's right.
I really do. Now, you can care all you want, Michael. You got to win games,
That's
right?
That's
and so it still comes back to on-field results. But, man, I'm encouraged by what I heard, but I'm still taking it as coach speak until we see those results.
That's right. At the end of the day, Mike Norvell is not paid to just be a good man.
Exactly.
He's not paid to just be a man of character or a rah-rah speech guy. He's actually 98% of his paycheck is about winning games. W's and L's.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can like Mike the character, you can like Mike the husband or the father, you can like Mike the motivational speaker. But at the end of the day, what he's going to be judged on and his legacy at Florida State is can he resurrect after resurrecting Florida State back to the National Elite? Can he put together a season with Tommy Castellanos, his chosen quarterback, right? Because that was one of the things I asked him about. I said, and this is questions you guys have been asking that we were bringing for you. But I asked him, I said, Mike, in your 5 years here, you talk about fit, and outside of Jordan Travis, FSU has struggled to find that right fit at quarterback. Why do you believe that Tommy Castellanos is the right fit for you? And he said, because he's got the confidence and the will, do. He will do. And so, okay, you're going to stake your claim and your legacy on that quarterback. You got to go out and perform. Do I think they can? I'm believing they can, but it's got to be seen on Saturdays.
Right, and it's got to be at a high level. Like 6 and 6, 7 and 5 is not good enough. Even if it's an improvement from last year, you got to go win at a high level.
Right.
And frankly, with the talent that you have, I just saw where the blue chip ratio for 2025 got put out. And Florida State, I think, was around 53%, top 20 in the country. Higher than a lot of teams on your schedule, lower than some, but you should go out and win 7, 8, 9 games.
Yes.
And so now you've done the talking. You've done that part.
That's right.
It's time to go put it out on the field. And so again, guys, we're excited. We're excited to be here. We're excited for the opportunity. It's really cool to be able to talk with these coaches and players from our perspective, as a fan outlet. But, man, we still got to see it on the field.
That's right.
And that's really the end-all, be-all there. So, man, that's going to pretty much be it, I guess, from this this recording of ACC Media. We're here. We got one more day. We saw day one as well. Maybe we'll come back with some thoughts on that later. I don't want to run you guys too long in this. We want to keep it FSU-centric because that's who we talked to today. We did get to talk to Phillips as well. And we've been talking to a lot of the teams on Florida State's schedule coming up this year. So we'll have that content rolling out for you guys as well. But, man, I'm encouraged and I'm excited, right?
Yeah.
But, again, it only matters in the win-loss column. But, guys, make sure you check out plantthespear.com. Michael's been cranking out some articles here. He's getting ready to get one finished up now on what we read today and what we heard from Mike Norvell. We're going to get a lot of these videos edited and posted on the channel as well, so make sure you check that out. Like and subscribe to stay connected. Make sure that you rate and review us on the podcast. Helps us reach other Noel fans. It's because of you guys we're able to do this. And so we really, really appreciate that. We aim to be the voice of the fans. We aim to be your chosen fan outlet to represent you for the Florida State fan base. And so we just can't thank you enough because without you guys, this would not be possible.
Absolutely. And just to say, like Jesse said, this would not be possible without you. Everything that you guys do, from when you like and subscribe, when you share our stuff, when you comment, man, keep staying in the comments, keep telling us the questions you want to get asked because we're going to be the ones to ask them, right? And when you join the membership, that membership, it's a small fee. It doesn't go to us because we have our own jobs. It actually goes right back into giving you more of the content that you deserve as Florida State fans. So, man, join the membership, like and subscribe, share. Come join us in this journey as we cheer on our Noles.
Yeah, we appreciate it, guys, and make sure you stay tuned. We'll have a lot more episodes coming up. Maybe we'll be able to, in a little quieter setting, we'll be able to kind of go through some thoughts and stuff like that. But make sure you stay connected. We appreciate you guys. We owe it all to you. Thank you for tuning in. From ACC Kickoff 2025, I'm Jesse. That's Michael. We are Plant the Spear. Thanks for watching. As always, Michael,
go
Noles.
Noles.